In the first episode of One Punch Man, we see how Saitama decided to become a hero for fun, and we also learn what his life is like now that he is as strong as he always wished he could be. Before he was One Punch Man, he was just a businessman, and not even a good one. Having just failed yet another job interview, Saitama was ready to give up when he was confronted by a giant crabman monster thing. What is this? At this point, Saitama honestly couldn't care less about what the monster does to him, and the monster even remarked that they had the same unfeeling, emotionless eyes, and even let him live on because of it. Then, by sheer chance, Saitama stumbles across the very boy that the crabman was looking for. At first, it seems Saitama is going to keep walking and minding his own business, but then the crabman shows up and attacks the boy. Leaping into action, Saitama saves the colossal-chinned child, showing us that not only does he have the heart of a hero, but that he is in fact merely bored rather than apathetic, which is a very important distinction. Boredom is not the same as apathy or not caring. As someone who is apathetic doesn't care one way or another what they are doing, someone who is bored will actively seek, or at least want, to end their own boredom. Ultimately, Saitama could easily become apathetic if he is unable to end his boredom, though. Boredom is a short-term problem that, if it persists, can develop into apathy, and in some cases, boredom can stem from depression. Now, if you've seen the show, then you likely already know all this, but it bears repeating if we are going to be delving deep into the mind of our favorite Caped Crusader. First, we know from the second episode that Saitama is 23 here, right around the age that people are said to be at their least risk of boredom, the booming early to mid-20s. So Saitama is bored, possibly even chronically bored. And that's even before he has superpowers, which is thought to be the cause of his boredom. And indeed, for a short time it is, but we'll get to that. So if we cross-reference this scene with what we know about the psychological effects of boredom, we can learn something new about Saitama. Research by James Dankert shows that people reaching about Saitama's age are much less likely to experience boredom, but people with fewer dopamine receptors in the brain seem to be more likely to get bored easily. So what all of this tells us is that, given Saitama's age, he may have fewer than average of those dopamine receptors in his brain. But what is dopamine? Dopamine is widely known as the reward chemical and is usually released in the brain when you do something pleasant, like eating a nice big serving of your favorite food, or when someone that you admire congratulates you on a job well done. But what else does the mighty dopamine do? Well, it's quite a workhorse of a compound. Dopamine has been linked with motivation, pleasure, cognition, memory, and fine motor control, and it's also responsible for multiple chemical reactions in your brain. Now we can see how dopamine deficiency would be detrimental to the well-being of our rubber-booted friend. And this deficiency can be caused by many different things, from your body simply not creating enough, or you just burning through it too fast for it to be fully used. People who suffer from dopamine deficiency show signs that are common in most people, but sufferers find that they may be affected by all of these conditions. Lack of motivation is one of the major symptoms associated with low dopamine. Memory problems are also common, and we can see this in Saitama from time to time. For example, when he forgot about the date of the supermarket sale. Depression is a rather difficult subject to cover because not much hard evidence is known about it. Plus, each case varies from person to person. Many experts believe that it is caused by an imbalance of serotonin, a mood-elevating chemical produced in your body. But many are now shifting their sights to dopamine as part of the problem. In fact, there are even cases of depression that stem from dopamine deficiency alone. This is why some antidepressants work for one person, but won't for another, sometimes detrimentally. And we can see that Saitama suffers from a lack of dopamine-induced mild depression, as its largest symptom is lethargy and boredom, while serotonin depression is characterized by anxiety. There are a few times where he really gets into being a superhero, really, truly enjoying himself, and these emotions that come out are emotions that can be linked with an increase of adrenaline, what most of us call an adrenaline rush. But how would that make you happier? Or at least not bored. During an adrenaline rush, the adrenal glands produce adrenaline by transforming the amino acid tyrosine into dopamine. Oxygenation of dopamine yields noradrenaline, which is then converted into adrenaline. The adrenaline is used in your body to increase its efficiency, essentially. But the leftover dopamine that's there from the process is still in your system. If you were a sufferer of dopamine depression, then an adrenaline rush would cause you to feel alleviated of your symptoms. A temporary cure, you could say. But of course, that isn't the only cure. There are other ways too. The most common and easy way that tons of people all across the globe and throughout all of history have done is with caffeine. usually in teas and coffees. Caffeine, among other things, kickstarts your brain's dopamine receptors, making them extra susceptible to the effects of dopamine. Caffeine is a miracle substance and is part of why the Enlightenment happened. People swapped from using alcohol, a depressant, all the time, and started drinking tea and coffee, stimulating them to do more. It's amazing! Getting back to our balding brute, Saitama shows a real sense of boredom throughout the whole of episode 1. We can see him aloof, antisocial, and, well, bored. He even agrees with the Bicep King on how empty and boring overwhelming power can be. And this intense boredom continues throughout the beginning of episode 2. But later in this episode, we see him take in a lone cyborg, Genos, as a disciple. He's sort of the sidekick type. With the introduction of Genos, we get a quite interesting character interaction. Saitama is rather reluctant at first, but after being forced to listen to Genos' sob story, he reluctantly agrees to train him. I mean, his life wasn't enriched by the introduction of super strength like he thought it would be, so why not attempt to teach the next generation? That's always fulfilling, right? This lines up with real-world studies done on people who have won the lottery. According to research, lottery winners report that they aren't any happier after getting that money than they were before. But they also aren't less happy either. They haven't changed, only the stuff around them has. And this lack of change is because, with a new standard of living, comes its own issues. Yes, you don't have to worry about bills, but now you have to worry about investments. Now, of course, this isn't every lotto winner, but it is the average. And it seems to me that the same thing happened to Saitama. He has gained amazing power, but it hasn't improved his life, and this is why you see that he's become bored in the first episode. Just like many people aspiring to win the lottery, Saitama thought that gaining super strength would make his life better. But then, he had more power than he knew what to do with, and every chance he gets to show his power and have a good fun fight for once, just ends with a single punch. He's too strong to alleviate his boredom this way. However, backtracking a bit here, Genos is Saitama's sidekick, and like every good sidekick, he serves to better the hero in some way. With Batman, Robin was introduced to be more child-friendly for the comic, but in-universe, he serves to keep the Bat grounded. Genos seems to do the same for Saitama. The boredom Saitama reports to feeling in the first episode is a lot less apparent throughout the rest of the season. He seems more playful, more invested, and even registers to be a hero at the organization. Everything that Saitama does for the most part after Genos shows up seems to be in the context of relieving his boredom, and it seems to work. This may explain why, even though Genos seems to annoy him at times, he doesn't get rid of him at all. He recognizes that he isn't as bored with Genos around, and that he would have to go back to that crippling boredom if he ever left. But all this begs the question, what would happen if Saitama never met Genos? When deprived of stimulation for too long, people develop bad side effects. Depression, drug addiction, alcoholism, and even hallucinations. Saitama lives in an abandoned section of City Z where nobody else ever goes. His only human contact seems to be when he does his shopping, which, now that I think about it, explains why he's so fixated on the deals at the supermarket. Well, he is also poor, that would do it too. But just being poor makes supermarket deals more of a necessity than something to be excited about. He is extremely isolated, combined with the fact that he can't relate to anyone anymore, and he knows this, it's no wonder that his emotions are drifting away from him. Had he continued down this path, Saitama may have just started to get paranoid and started to see things that weren't there, possibly even imagining a villain that could, in fact, face him. In fact, we see the early stages of this happening in the first episode. In his dream, he imagines the Subterraneans as being a race of villains he can test himself against. It may only have started in his dreams, but that could easily extend to his waking state if left in isolation for too long. Now, could you imagine what it would be like if Saitama had that dream as a hallucination while he was awake? He would cause massive damage, and there would be no one who could stop him. This superhuman would be taking out whole cities, if not countries at a time. Maybe worse. Maybe he would become a villain, simply to alleviate his boredom and fight back against his hallucinations. But he doesn't, thanks to Genos. So in the end, I think that it is a good thing that Genos showed up. Genos acts as the emotional core to Saitama. He keeps him grounded and down to earth by providing something that Saitama desperately needs. That something being engagement. Something to think about. Something to obsess over. Be it whether he thinks he's scamming the young cyborg or trying to join the Hero Association or what have you, the evidence shows us that Saitama needs Genos just as much as Genos needs him. So how do you deal with boredom? Do you play a game, watch a YouTube video like these ones, or maybe you call up a friend, a loved one, someone you know you could always have a good time with? Even being bored together with a friend is better than being bored alone. And even human interaction with strangers online is better than isolating yourself. People are social animals. Our brains are designed to release dopamine when we are around those we love. In the end, that's what Saitama and Genos are. Good friends who rely on each other. We all need human interaction. Our brains literally thrive on it, and to be deprived of that all too important need can lead to some very bad things. So talk to people, your brother, your sister, a friend or colleague, go out for a drink or stay in and play a game. Whatever you do, do it together, and remember to never stop using that noggin.